From censored files to clear evidence, this is Redacted Realms.
The whisper of a child, clear as a bell in the dead of night, confessed a secret that should never have been spoken. Daddy didn't mean to push her. The admission hung in the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and something coppery, like old pennies. Then, the voice grew conspiratorial, sticky with a shared guilt. But the man in the blue coat helped him hide her in the old well. In a quiet kitchen, John felt the world tilt. His fingers went numb, releasing the mug he hadn't realized he was holding. The ceramic exploded on the floor, a sharp punctuation to the nightmare now echoing in his mind. That voice. It wasn't a memory. It was here, now, and it knew everything. The glass shattered. A sharp, crystalline explosion. John turned, his voice tight. "What did you say?" Lily, just 6, clutched a ragged teddy bear, her gaze fixed past him on an empty corner. She whispered to the void. "He's scared now, Mr. Whispers. You said he would be." This is John Miller. A year ago, his world was picture perfect. A beautiful wife, Sarah. A dream home on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. Then, the foundation of that life crumbled without warning. Sarah vanished, leaving behind a void filled only by questions and the scent of turned earth. Their bright, bubbly daughter, Lily, brought light to every moment. Then, one rainy November night, Sarah vanished without a trace. Archival home videos show a different time. Sarah's laugh echoing as she pushes Lily higher. John stands at a barbecue, the scene now a haunting echo of a shattered normalcy. The case grew cold, a body never found, witnesses non-existent. All that remained was a vanished wife, a husband steeped in grief, and a small, shattered daughter. The house held only the scent of old flowers and the oppressive weight of absence. Every unanswered question settled like a fine, cold dust over their lives. John was the prime suspect, the husband always is. But without evidence, without a crime scene, the case stalled. He was left alone to pick up the pieces, to raise Lily amidst the suffocating whispers of their community. Present day. John is tired, thinner, moving through a house that's clean but feels empty. The air carries the faint scent of bleach and something metallic underneath. In the dim light, Lily's pencil scratched softly against the paper as she drew. Her silence had finally broken, offering the first fragile hope. But the words that came weren't about her missing mother. She was speaking to someone else in the room with her. John tucked Lily into bed, her small frame barely making a dent on the pillows. "Daddy, can you leave the hall light on?" she whispered, clutching a threadbare stuffed rabbit. "For me and Mr. Whispers." John forced a smile that felt brittle, like old plaster. "Mr. Whispers, huh?" The name hung in the air, carrying the faint, sweet rot scent of forgotten things. "Is that your new friend?" Lily nodded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's been here a long time." The words hung in the damp air. She paused, her small hand gesturing toward the walls. "He says, the house was sad before we came." A faint, coppery scent touched the air. At first, John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He told himself it was just a classic, imaginary friend. A harmless coping mechanism. Nothing more. A comforting lie he could almost believe. Child psychologists online dismissed it as normal development, but the details, they curdled the blood. In the quiet study, the only sound was the soft scratch of wax on paper. The air carried the faint, sweet scent of crayons, yet beneath it lingered something else. A dry, metallic tang, like old pennies. Her small fingers moved with a strange, methodical precision, pressing down until the paper nearly tore. Each stroke felt less like creation and more like a grim transcription. What she was depicting wasn't from any cartoon or storybook. It was a scene of stark, silent figures in a shadowed wood, watched by too many eyes. A crude drawing of a woman in a yellow dress, Sarah's favorite, lay at the bottom of a dark circle. Stick figure John stood beside a taller man with a blue scribble for a coat. John's voice was tight as he asked, "Who's that, sweetie?" Lily pointed directly at the blue-coated figure. "That's you, and that's the blue coat man." Mud. The night Sarah vanished, rain had hammered the earth for hours. Mr. Whispers noted both the thick, with dark, clinging earth. The air held the wet, mineral scent of soaked soil and something faintly metallic. It was the kind of mud that doesn't just stain, it remembers. The clay-rich soil behind their property would have been a swamp centuries ago, its damp, clinging scent still rising from the earth. John felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The cold seeped into his bones from the very ground itself. The facts from Mr. Whispers became more specific, whispered details that carried the faint, metallic tang of ozone. Each new piece of information settled like a weight from the stagnant air, thick with the promise of rock. The stranger knew details that chilled John to the core. Sarah's private nickname for him, Johnny, and the exact locket she wore that vanished without a trace. But it was the man's repeated, frantic mentions of a grind, blue coat man, that seeded a deep, unsettling fear. Now, John scrambled through old photo albums on the living room floor, the scent of aged paper and dust hanging thick in the air. His hands froze on a picture from a charity golf event. And there, in the background, stood a man in a distinct blue coat. There they are, captured in a moment of innocence. Sarah stands beside him, her smile frozen in time. And there, on his other side, stands his older brother, Mike, his dependable, steady brother. Mike's navy windbreaker is a sharp contrast to the soft background, a detail that would only become significant later. The reliable brother, a title that would soon curdle in the memory, taking on a new, unsettling meaning. Mike was the one who drove through the night to be with John after Sarah vanished. He helped coordinate search parties, handled the media, and held John up when grief made his legs fail. Mike, who owned a distinctive blue coat that smelled faintly of ozone and damp wool. Now John stood in Mike's house, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and something metallic beneath. They sat on the patio, the night air thick and humid. Mike leaned in, his voice low. "You look like hell, Johnny. Is it the investigation? They're not bothering you again, are they?" Johnny didn't answer at first, his gaze fixed on something unseen in the darkness beyond the patio. When he finally spoke, the words came out flat, hollow. "It's Lily." Her imaginary friend whispers unsettling things. Mike takes a long, deliberate sip of beer, the glass slick with condensation. The air thickens with the scent of stale hops and something faintly metallic. "Kids, right?" he mutters, the words hanging in the heavy quiet. Her mind was her only refuge now, a fragile sanctuary cobbled together from denial and desperation. John's voice broke through the quiet, carrying a tremor that felt colder than the air itself. "She told me," he whispered, the words hanging like a weight. "She said the man in the blue coat helped me." The statement settled, leaving behind the faint, metallic scent of ozone and the slow, sticky dread of a truth that offered no comfort. That night, a damp, metallic scent hung in the air. His voice emerged too calm, too steady. "Help you with what? You were here with me, remember? We watched the game, and you passed out on my couch, a complete wreck." That's exactly what I told the police. And he had. John's alibi was his brother's sworn testimony, solid as granite. But John's own memory of that night was a fractured, unreliable thing. He could recall the fight with Sarah, sharp and brutal, a terrible, final argument that seemed to swallow the hours that followed into a void. He remembered the whiskey's burn, the blur of headlights, then nothing but a crushing void of shame. But what if that void wasn't empty? What if something had been waiting in the dark all along? A damp, metallic scent, like wet iron and old soil, seeped into the car's stale air. Then, in the backseat, a slow, deliberate inhalation cut through the patter of the rain. John lay awake, his gaze fixed on the ceiling shadows. For Lily's room, her voice drifted through the door, soft, conversational. He slid from the sheets, the floorboards cold beneath his bare feet, and crept toward her room. As he reached the door, Lily's whisper carried through the wood. And then the lady stopped singing. "Why did she stop singing, mister?" Whispers. A pause, heavy with the scent of damp earth and ozone, as if listening for something just beyond the edge of hearing. Lily's voice was a hollow echo. "Because the mud was in her mouth?" John stumbled back, a ragged, wet gasp tearing from his throat as a primal dread took hold. The next morning, John drives to the property's wooded edge, a heavy-duty flashlight in hand. He steps into the woods, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The map's annotation about the sealed well plays in his mind with every crunch of twigs underfoot. An unnatural stillness settles around him, broken only by the distant drip of moisture from the branches. He discovered the spot, a concrete slab, choked with weeds but freshly disturbed. The heavy lid sat slightly askew, revealing a narrow, black gap. As he aimed his flashlight into the void, the beam caught a flash of faded yellow fabric. Narrator. The world stopped. The birdsong vanished. The Texas wind fell still. His own heartbeat ceased its rhythm. In that absolute cessation, a new presence became undeniable. The air grew thick, tasting of ozone and dry earth. The companion of his childhood was no longer a figment. He was a witness. And John knew two things with absolute, soul-crushing certainty. One, Sarah was here. The faint scent of her perfume, jasmine and rain, lingered in the damp air, a ghost of her presence. Two, he did not put her here. The floorboards beneath him felt sticky, with a cold, unfamiliar residue. A primal dread took hold, freezing the air in his lungs as a soft, rhythmic scratching began somewhere in the walls. Mike stood in John's living room, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and something metallic, like old pennies. John's voice cut through the quiet, a low, controlled hum that felt colder than the draft seeping under the door. "I went to the old well today, Mike." Mike's reply was a dry rasp, his throat suddenly tight. "What?" John, Lily's friend, stood frozen as the question echoed in his mind. Why? The air grew thick, with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old iron. A faint scratching sound whispered from the walls, growing into a low, insistent murmur. Then, a cold, sticky dread took hold as he realized Mr. Whispers was here. He was unnervingly detailed, recounting every moment with chilling precision. Mike's voice cut through, sharp and desperate. "John, you have to stop this. You're losing it." The words hung in the air, thick with the scent of stale sweat and ozone. A cold, damp dread seeped into the space between them. John's voice cracked, raw with accusation, as he shouted, "He told me about the blue coat! He told me you were muddy!" The mask slipped in an instant. Mike's kindly demeanor dissolved. his face hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old iron. "You don't remember, do you?" Mike's words were a low, chilling whisper, devoid of any brotherly warmth. Your call came through choked with sobs, hysterical and raw. You stammered that you'd argued, that she'd tumbled down the stairs, that she was gone. You whispered you'd ruin your life, Lily's like. "So I came. I cleaned up your mess. I protected you. I buried my sister-in-law for you." John's voice breaks, tears streaming down his face. He tries to speak, but the words catch in his throat. "I pushed her? No, Mike. You don't get to be the grieving husband now. I did the hard thing. For years, I've carried this weight alone, bathed in sympathy and casseroles, perfecting your poor, brave John performance. The charade ends now. Outside, the night is pierced by the strobing red and blue of police cruisers. Mike is led away in cuffs, his expression hollow, as a social worker gently takes little Lily's hand, pale. John sat across from the detective, his face a pale mask of confusion and terror. The truth was a monstrous creature with two heads. One head held a moment of violent rage that John's mind had locked away, a black hole in his memory. The other belonged to his brother Mike, whose confession, moving a body, leaving an alibi, was a twisted act of loyalty that now sealed their doom. The charge against John? Manslaughter, a family, utterly destroyed. Weeks later, the air in their home still carried the metallic scent of wood. Whispers seemed to cling to the wallpaper, and every floorboard groaned with memory. John, out on bail, occupied a cramped apartment while Lily stayed with her grandparents. During a supervised visit, she played quietly on the floor, the air thick with unspoken tension. John's breath pitched as he watched her. The metallic scent suddenly tainted the room. He leaned in, his voice a strange whisper. "Lily, is Mr." Lily's gaze drifted toward the corner, and she gave a slow, deliberate nod. "He says he's glad the man in the blue coat is gone," she whispered, the words barely audible. "He didn't like him." John's voice was a strange whisper, his question hanging in the thick, cold air. Lily pressed him, a voice of taut wire in the dead air. "Why did you tell me? Why help at all?" She went still, her head tilting as if catching a whisper from the empty corner of the room. The scent of old paper and cold stone filled her nostrils as she waited for the reply only she could hear. Her lips parted, and she spoke the ghost's simple, chilling answer. "He says he didn't like the secret. He whispered that the lady in the well was once his friend, too. She used to sing to him long ago, before the well claimed her, before she became my mother." John went utterly still, the damp air clinging to his skin. The color drained from John's face, leaving it ashen and hollow. Sarah had grown up in that very house, sharing childhood tales of an imaginary companion. She spoke of a quiet presence, she called her, whisper in the walls, a soft, persistent murmur in the dark. And in that chilling instant, a terrible truth crystallized in John's mind. Mr. Whispers was never Lily's creation. He was a leftover, a silent tenant from Sarah's own childhood, a witness to her death, who waited in the damp, forgotten spaces between their lives, for a new little girl to listen, so he could finally tell the truth. The final frame holds on Lily, her gaze moving from her broken father to that empty corner. A ghost of a smile touches her lips, not of joy, but of release. Her voice is a soft, final whisper in the heavy, still air. "It's okay, Mr. Whispers," she breathes. "You can go now. Mommy's waiting for you." Sometimes, the most terrifying secrets aren't buried in the ground. They're hiding in plain sight, in the innocent voice of a child. And the question that haunts me isn't about the crime. What stories are the walls of your house holding on to? Just waiting for someone to listen. The scent of old dust and something metallic hangs in the still air. A faint scratching echoes from within the plaster, patient and persistent.
If this file opened your eyes, subscribe and open the next case.